Today I'm going to be recording my first webcam lecture, and this is definitely the first time I've done this, so I'm very unfamiliar with the software, but I'm going to give it a shot. Hopefully this goes well, so please be patient and forgiving with me. Today we're going to discuss seafloor spreading. That's going to be today's lecture. Now, first thing I want you to do is just think about one of the previous lectures and discussions that we've had, talking about Alfred Wegener, and think about what he was best known for and some of the things we talked about with Alfred Wegener. Of course, he was best known for coming up with the idea of continental drift. Now, continental drift, you should know the definition of that. Now, one of the things that can help us to understand the idea of continental drift is to know what are these tectonic plates. Tectonic plates are defined as the Earth's broken crust. It's broken into pieces, and those pieces are each called tectonic plates. You can see there's several of them. Some of them are quite large, some of them are quite a bit smaller, and there's some much smaller ones as well. And they generally encompass entire continents, like the North American plate, the African plate. One of the big questions that Wegener could not answer was what causes the continents to move. Now, he had a couple problems. One of his problems that a lot of people didn't believe him about continental drift was that the continents are so big and they move so slowly that it was very difficult to see this in action, if not really impossible with the technology of the time. And also the other big question is he could not explain the mechanism. He could not explain how the tectonic plates could move, how the continents could actually drift over time. A good place to start is to look at the map of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, here's the Atlantic Ocean, here's the United States, Europe, hopefully. Now, one of the neat things about the Atlantic Ocean is right down through the middle of it is what's called the MidAtlantic Ridge, and there is a lot going on there at the MidAtlantic Ridge. Here's a diagram that kind of give you a little bit of an idea what's happening. And in our first lecture, we talked about the different layers of the Earth. We talked about having a core, the liquid mantle, and the crust. In certain places, the crust is broken, and that would be one of the plates. And here, for example, is a large plate. And between where the plates are, this liquid magma from the mantle can be pushed up and come up through those breaks, and those breaks are called ridges. In this case, this one is the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Here's a drawing of it. Now, this drawing comes from sonar mapping. Floor spreading is a process where new ocean floor is made from molten rock between plates and moves ocean plates apart. Now, the seafloor spreading is happening really deep under the ocean. This is going to make it really difficult to observe in action. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is pretty much the deepest parts of the ocean you can find anywhere. And so we're talking close to 7 miles deep in some places, not very conveniently located.
Do you know there's also a very deep part of the ocean called the Twilight Zone?
I did not know that. Thank you. Let's talk about how you can study the Mid-Atlantic Ridge and also the ocean floor itself without actually going down there. What people do is you can actually send sonar signals down deep under the ocean, and the entire ocean floor in the Atlantic has been mapped out like this, where boats, naval vessels will float around, they'll shoot sonar signals down, and then what happens is these sound waves will bounce off of the floor and return back up to the ship, and they can time how long it takes those sound waves to return, and the longer it takes the sound waves to return, the deeper the ocean is here. So if a sound wave is shot here, it will bounce, and maybe I'm just going to make up numbers. Let's say it takes 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, and here it might go 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000, 5 1,000, so that you can get an idea of how deep the ocean is at that point.
World War II. German U-boats were on the prowl. To track them, the Allied forces developed new sonar methods, and scientists were enlisted to help survey the ocean floor. When the United States entered the war, Harry Hess was a geology professor at Princeton University. But he also happened to be a Navy reservist, so it wasn't long before he found himself in command of an attack transport ship in the Pacific. To help maneuver when coming in for a beach landing, Hess's ship was equipped with a depth sounder. Now, still being a geologist at heart, he used the sounder to measure the depth of the ocean floor whenever his ship was out to sea. Now, what he discovered startled him. Until the Second World War, most scientists imagined the bottom of the ocean looked like this: flat, lined with nothing but sediment. But about 2 miles beneath the waves of the Pacific Ocean, Harry Hess discovered something else entirely. Mountains, like these here in California, with deep canyons and trenches, hundreds of high peaks that we now believe were once active volcanoes, and all of this at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean.
Under the bottom of the ocean is not a very convenient place to be looking at the MidAtlantic Ridge. So conveniently, though, a nice thing is that there is the island of Iceland. Iceland, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge happens to travel right through it. And this island is in fact growing. Every year it gets a little bit bigger in some places, but it does get a little bit smaller due to erosion in others. But it is growing, it's spreading out, it's being pushed out from that Mid-Atlantic Ridge a little bit each year. Here we could see some pictures of what it might look like if you were actually in Iceland being able to explore it. I think these pictures are really pretty cool. You could see these rocks that were at one point were together. These are being split apart in opposite directions. And here you can see kind of a little bit of a scale with this fellow's in here, actually in the ridge. And this is a tourist attraction as well that you can hike and see these kind of things. So this is kind of a real neat place that you can actually view firsthand what's going on. This is my favorite picture. I like this, where somebody actually built a bridge to go across the ridge. So in reality, there's a bridge that goes across 2 continental plates. So you have the one continental plate going this direction, the European plate, the Eurasian, and then we have the North American plate going the opposite direction here on this side of the continent. Yes?
Wouldn't you die if you fall off the bridge or no?
I would only be speculating. Thanks for asking, though. Good question. Okay, so here you have, as you can see on the drawing now, North American plate going this direction, Eurasian plate going this direction. Imagine a bridge actually being crossed over that. So, a good question to ask yourself is, why is Iceland such a popular place to study the ocean ridges? Well, you can study it on dry land versus going to the bottom of the ocean. So definitely a very useful place to study the Mid-Atlantic Ridge and seafloor spreading. Okay, now let's talk about the plates themselves. Now, so those big, huge plates, now we understand that there's lava, magma coming up at these big cracks in between the plates. So how does this help make the plates move? The less dense lava, okay, is coming up. So you know it's less dense because if it was more dense, it would sink. So we have less dense lava or magma coming up through those cracks as it goes, and it comes up those cracks like at the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. So here we see lava being pushed up. This is the less dense magma being pushed up. As it being pushed up, there's force being applied laterally on these continental plates. Yeah, well, when you go down, and there have been explorers that have been able to take submarines down deep under the ocean, and they have been able to take photos and movies. Yeah, and lava hits the bottom of the ocean. What do you think happens to it? Does it take a very long time to cool and to solidify, or does it cool very quickly and solidify quickly? What do you think? Quickly. That's right, because water's going to cool it down, and it's going to make it cool very, very quickly. And if you even think all the way back down to 6th grade when we learned about the rock cycle, you can imagine what type of rock this is going to be. What type of rock is going to be formed?
Like a really big rock?
Okay. All right. Is it going to be igneous? Is it going to be sedimentary? Or is it going to be metamorphic? So that's something for you to think about.
Metamorphic.
Well, that is a possible answer. Unfortunately, it's not the correct one. So it is going to be igneous rock, and we could see some pictures of that. So this is pretty neat. So you can see the magma that's lava, it's liquid, hitting the cold ocean and solidifying very, very quickly. Here you can actually see the little part of the submarine here. That's one of the submarines that is built to go very, very deep under the ocean. Okay, here's a vent, and this would be near the ridge, and you have all kinds of stuff coming out here. And what's cool about this is the submarines that have gone down there to explore have found these vents, and they've also discovered, amazingly, that there are things living down there. Like, for example, these vents, there's bacteria that actually can eat the carbon molecules that are coming out of the vent, and we call that chemosynthesis. And then other little things like brine shrimp, different types of shrimp can actually come in and eat the bacteria. And so this is a very unusual occurrence where the living organisms do not require the sun for their food chain. So because this is energy that's coming directly from the center of the earth. Pretty awesome. After the magma rises, that less dense magma rises, it's going to solidify, it's going to harden, and as it hardens, it's going to expand, and it's going to push the seafloor away from the ridge in both directions. So you're going to get those two continents spreading apart over time and making the ocean actually bigger. So the Atlantic Ocean is actually getting bigger each year. Now here's some pictures, and you can see now here's some of the rock formations after the magma has cooled. Things you probably do know is that the Earth does have a magnetic field, and when you use a compass, one side of the magnet will point to the north, the other side of the magnet will point to the south. What wasn't known until people started to explore the ocean floor, that these magnetic fields have not always been the same way as they are today. So like, for example, if they studied some rocks here, they noticed that the iron minerals, and this is mostly basalt, as we say that it's the ocean crust is mostly basaltic, and it's very high in iron, and that iron is attracted to the magnets, and those iron minerals will align themselves in a certain way towards the poles, depending on what the polarity is. They found some rocks that were pointing in the other direction, that the minerals actually were aligned in a different direction. And what they found, which is really neat, is that if you went to the west of the oceanic ridge, is that there was a set of rocks that matched the reverse polarity here and here. And then also there were lines of rock that had what we would call normal polarity, and those matched here and here. So here we have the newest rock, and it would spread out, and then this rock and this rock are the same age. This rock and this rock are the same age. This rock and this rock are the same age, and so on as it goes out. And they discovered that the Earth's magnetic field actually reversed several times throughout geological history. Pretty neat.
Harry Hess had discovered that the seafloor was spreading. He concluded that molten rock was being forced up from inside the Earth at the ridge, where it then formed into new crust on the ocean floor. Gradually, it was pushed away on either side as more molten rock continued pushing up from behind it. Hess called his great discovery seafloor spreading.
New ocean crust being formed. And over here, this is something we'll talk about in the future, where what happens to the oceanic crust, eventually it's going to get pushed back down to the upper mantle. Here's a nice diagram for you to study. Take a close look at this diagram. Let's take a look at this peak and this peak. This is peak A1 and A2. This is peak B1 and B2. Now, of these peaks, which one do you think is older? Do you think A1 or B1 is made up of older rock? The correct answer is that B1 is older, and you can tell that it's older because it is further away from the ridge. It has taken a longer amount of time for it to be pushed away from its point of origin, that mid-ocean ridge, and now it's way over here. These are the newer rocks. These are very new, very recently made rocks as the magma comes up and into the ocean. Take a look at A1 versus B1. You notice that A1 is much taller than B1. Why is A1 taller than B1? The reason is that A1 is taller than B1 because B1 is older. Since it's older, it's been under the water, it's been exposed to weathering and erosion for a much, much longer time than rock A1. So it's going to be shorter, it's going to be more worn away, and it's not going to be as sharp and as pointy. So you can see even over time it's getting shorter and smaller. Also, these peaks are getting more rounded and more smooth.
For years, oceanographers surveying the Atlantic Ocean had taken sonar readings that indicated there was something down there, something big. In 1953, they found out what it was, a 12,000-mile-long mountain range. They called it the MidAtlantic. How high is a mountain in the middle of the Atlantic?
The average seafloor depths are on the order of about 4,000 to 5,000 meters. The mid-ocean ridge sits up at about 2,500 meters. So they sit about 2.5 kilometers on average higher than the surrounding seafloor that's shown here in the deep blue colors.
So that's over a mile high.
Yes.
It's impressive. I can't put it any other way. It's a fascinating landscape, and you can't compare it with anything you know on the Earth's surface. There's a lot of hydrothermal activity there. Water is emerging from underwater vents that are like springs that we have on land, except the water coming out is very hot, at times up to 400 degrees Celsius. At these high temperatures, this superheated seawater behaves very aggressively. What that means is that it leaches out certain components of the crust, so the water that emerges has a very special composition. A black smoker is a vent where these extremely hot solutions emerge. You get these plumes, like smoke, and they form just the way that chimney smoke would spread out here in the atmosphere.
Is a central crevasse, a rift between plates of the Earth's crust. As these plates move apart, they expose the fiery heart of the planet. But despite the fact that up to 95% of the world's volcanic activity occurs on the ridge, almost no eruptions have ever been witnessed here, let alone studied or sampled. This film from an eruption more than a kilometre deep off Samoa is one of the very few records we have.
The idea of seafloor spreading was supported by the dating of rock that was found along the ocean ridge. And as we were just talking about, the youngest rocks are going to be found closest to the ridge. And as time goes by, those new rocks are going to be further and further away from the mid-Atlantic ridge. And so you can know that as you get further and further away from the ridge, the rocks are going to get older and older. Thank you for joining us. Hope this was helpful. I would like to hear some comments and let me know what you think of this, and hopefully we can try to improve our skills and the process. Thank you.